and welcome to NEK-TV, and the first in a series that's going to be called NEK VT Rocks. It's a takeoff on a Facebook page, Newport, Vermont Rocks. And our guest today is Hal Newman. Hal is the director of the Haskell Opera House, and he's going to talk to us about the influence, the origins, the history, and all the wonderful things that are now happening at the Haskell. Hal, welcome to NEK-TV.
Well, thank you, Pam. This is really cool.
This is public TV. It's fun.
It's wonderful. It's quite the revelation, actually. We don't have a counterpart on the Quebec side, so this is wonderful.
Yeah, Hal lives over the border, the other side, but that's what's so magical about the Haskell, because the Haskell sits on the border. So why don't you tell us about how you got to be at the Haskell and what you're doing there?
Well, we moved to Stansted 7 years ago. This will be our 7th summer down here on the line. We moved from Pointe Claire, so a suburb of Montreal, to get a better quality of life, to try life in the country, to get our kids different perspective. And the Haskell immediately became part of our family, because when we moved here, our kids were 11. We have twin 18-year-old girls, young women. And so they did their first hip-hop recital at the Haskell. And we were thinking, what is this place where you sit in the audience in Vermont and your kids perform in Quebec? And we thought, this is amazing. And we went to a number of shows over the years, and my daughters and my wife Diane are much more musically and theater oriented than I am, so they went to more shows. And yet I had this continuing fascination with the place. And we were hosting house concerts at our house in Stansted, and drawing people from over the line, from this side of the line. And
the invisible line.
The invisible line. Yeah, actually, it's interesting that you should say that. Because when you live in Montreal, the border is something, it's almost concrete.
Right.
And then when you move here, it really becomes a metaphorical line that is just part of everyday life. And I saw one day that they were advertising. I knew Lynn was talking about retirement. Lynn
Lima.
Right, Lynn Lima from QNEK.
Yeah.
And Lynn was our daughter's voice coach when she was doing rehearsals to get into college. And they advertised for the director of the Opera House, and I said, I'm going to put in, amid much eye rolling in our household. And then they called me for an interview, and I remember my wife said, how'd it go? And I said, I laid out this vision of, doing a whole lot of music and intermixing that with QNEK and getting other theater and dance and really turning it into a performing arts gateway between the two communities. And the speculation in our house was that that probably wasn't the right response. And then I got hired. So
it was a shared vision.
Yes, it's a shared vision, and yeah, I guess I'm a dreamer or an eternal optimist, and I recognize, I'm speaking to people on both sides of this border, that we've all lived through having our hopes built up and then dashed.
Right.
We know what's happened in Newport. We know what's happened on the U.S. side of the line, and on the Canadian side, our economy is focused on the granite industry and its ebbs and flows. And if there are a lot of housing starts, it's great. If there aren't, things get awfully quiet awfully quickly. And I always believed that if you looked around, that we had everything. Everything was here. We had the fantastic winter sports, fantastic summer sports. We have the lake, and we have the people. So I always thought, well, why couldn't we be kind of Santa Cruz of the East and have a music and performing arts economy? Sorry, that was a really long answer. But
no, it's covered a lot of ground, and that does appear to be a goal that is shared by many people. I've been to a couple of the performances recently at the Haskell, and they've blown my mind. They're absolutely fabulous. Who you're pulling in are high-end, very skilled performers, and very diverse, which is something we haven't had access to up here recently. We can haul away to 2 hours to Burlington or Montpelier, or we can trek up to Montreal, and we all do that. But it's so nice to have something on our own doorstep.
And I took inspiration from like the late great Cynthia Moore, who
Right.
and Eugene, and the Newport Jazz Festival,
Right.
and they were able to attract, and that's the Cynthia Effect.
Right.
They were able to attract absolutely first-rate jazz artists, and I find that as soon as you get an artist here, I'm sure that there's a pause for consideration when they get the note, when they get the proposal, and they go, where am I going? And then when you get them here, you see it's the immediacy, they go, oh my God, this place is gorgeous. What a slice of life.
Right.
You can unwind, Jeff Atchison stayed at the Little Ginesta.
Right.
And, he was so relaxed. And that's brilliant, that's Ruth Sproul's effect.
Right.
And we see that with our house concerts, and we see like Jeff Atchison when he played at the Haskell. The crowd was sparse, and I was thinking, how's this going to go?
The crowd loved it.
And he loved it.
Right. So how are we going to build that? What does Derby Line think? I mean, I'm sitting in Newport and asking, gee, what does Derby Line think? Are people talking to you in Derby Line?
I never really ask where people are from. For me, people are people, no matter which flag they swear allegiance to, or what country or zip code or postal code they're in. So people seem interested. I don't think historically that the Haskell has been seen as a music venue, so it's a tough go. It's always, we know from the house concerts that the first year is kind of a building process. Learning as we go.
So if you were looking at this as, quote, marketing, which it isn't really, but it also is, what would you tell people about coming to one of your performances? For example, there's one on Thursday night. Who would really love that performance if they knew about it?
Right. I think, well, actually, so the Thursday night show is just impossible. It's funny, lately, the last 3 performers have all described the Haskell as being an impossible space. and I'll echo that. It's an impossible show. So David Greeley is a multi-Grammy nominee, one of the top Cajun fiddlers out of Louisiana. Arguably the best Cajun fiddler there is. And then Mary Rankin of the Rankin family and Ailey Robertson are just got named as the top Irish duo. And they both called within 24 hours of each other to ask if they could play the same date at the Haskell. And I asked if they would play together, and they said sure. So it's an impossible show. They've never played together in an impossible place. And what would I say to get people to come? I'd say that it's fantastic art. It's fantastic music. If you leave the show and you haven't clapped your hands or tapped your toes, then you need to be checked for a pulse. But that being said, I feel like we have an obligation to kind of occupy the Haskell from both sides of the line. That people in Stansted need to take more ownership. People from Derby Line, Newport need to take more ownership. The Haskells, it defies everything.
Right. And to me, living in Newport, the Haskell is this amazing opportunity to meet without any fuss or conflict or dramatization with a passport people who live across the border. It's where we truly are a community that comes together. And that's amazing. It's a wonderful feeling. It's also a fabulous library and a fabulous theater space. It's beautiful.
We've grown, our kids have grown up in the library. We go in and do mass orders of books.
Sure.
Of course, my wife's a librarian, so it's,
perfect.
it's funny. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was trying to see if we could get people interested in volunteering at the Haskell.
So you're not just a one-man band. It's not just you pulling all the pieces together.
No, it absolutely requires a full team of volunteers, and not only volunteers to volunteer performances, people who are experienced with marketing, with advertising, with fundraising. I've always found that the best thing I can do is surround myself with people who are a hell of a lot smarter than me, and let them shine. And that's what the Haskell needs. It needs us all. On Friday night there was a show, and it was a totally French evening. It was Catherine Majar was the artist who performed, and Perrine Leblanc was an author who did a reading, a Quebecois author. And what was amazing about the show is we paired up Americans with Canadians on the volunteer crew, and we exchanged a few key words, and then we had Newport residents saying merci, bienvenue, and it was wonderful, and we got so many compliments because people said, oh, they greeted us in English and then they said goodbye in French. And I thought, that's it, that's the Haskell.
Yes.
That's the coolest thing.
Would you think of running language classes there?
Oh, I'd love to.
Because there are
but
many
I think that's probably a library programming piece.
Would they be interested?
You'd have to ask Nancy.
It's not something that you have access to directly.
Well, so Nancy Rumery is the librarian, and the library, all of the programming is through Nancy. I'd love to see, it would be really interesting to have open mic night in the Opera House.
It would be wonderful.
With people of both languages, or I don't really know why it has to be limited to 2 languages.
It doesn't.
To multiple languages, multiple cultures. A jam night.
Be great. Are you planning on staying open all year? I see you have events scheduled through the summer.
We actually started this year in February with concerts using the children's room in the library. So yes, the programming goes right through the winter months. And there's this wonderful series of concerts for kids, and the next one is coming up. Oh, it's coming up soon. I just can't remember the date.
Where can people get information?
It's on the if you go to the haskellopera.com on the website, and it's actually listed right on the right side of the page. There's a calendar, so the next event is immediately listed, and if you click on it, it takes you through to the calendar.
Did you know that there's a calendar at NEK-TV with a sort of rolling item, and events can be listed there?
That would be fabulous. Yeah. And then there's also a Haskell library, a Haskell Free Library and Opera House Facebook page. So
lots of different options. And the press. Have the press been to see events there? I know Brian Maravich from the Newport Dispatch.
So the Newport Dispatch kind of live in the Haskell.
Yeah, that's great.
and that's fabulous. We've had fantastic support from NEK-TV. Also, not only on the before the camera side, but there's an enormous amount of technical support that Todd and his team have provided, which goes, unnoticed because no one knows. But we wouldn't have been able to pull off a lot of the audio work that we've done without their help. And that's how, if people are also looking for a way to contribute, and they don't have the monetary means, there are all kinds of technical issues that we could use help with. So if someone wants to drop me a line, my email is opera@haskellopera.com, and I'm open to anything.
So it sounds as though it's infinite in the ways in which people can become involved.
Right. Creativity is huge.
Yeah. One of the wonderful things about living up here, and you've probably noticed I'm not originally from here. It's sort of hard to miss.
It's that New England accent.
Yeah,
yes.
That's what it is that the same people tend to be involved in multiple things, and that's because we're a small community and we all excite each other. So people will get involved in something that they have a passion for, and then they hear about something else, and they learn skills along the way and share those skills.
I love that. My only concern with that is something we've already discussed, which is volunteer fatigue.
Yes.
And donor fatigue. And so we need to build out on our nucleus of volunteers.
Oh yeah.
I see no reason why someone couldn't drive up from Glover to be a part of what's at the Haskell. Fred Ducharme drives down from Outremont, in Montreal to volunteer. So There's no reason why we can't expand our base. And we have all these people who come here for a few weeks during the summer.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that prevents them from pitching in as a volunteer.
Absolutely. This
Right.
just has to get on their radar.
Exactly.
Which means everybody telling everybody else, sharing what we have. And if anybody hasn't been to the Haskell, it's an amazing place. I know when we have out-of-state or out-of-country visitors, it's one of the places on our list because it's so much fun, particularly with kids, to say, if you stand there, your left foot's in Canada, your right foot's in the USA.
It's so funny. I always point out one of the seats in which, when you sit, you'll have one cheek over the line.
Right.
And it's a favorite.
Yes.
And often when I'm up at the Haskell completing paperwork or I'm in transit, and then I'll see someone pull up, and we're not open for tours, but I'll see the out-of-state plate. You know, it'll be Connecticut or PA or recently New Mexico. And I'll just say, hey, do you want a sneak peek? Would you like to come in? And I love giving tours of the place. It's
Maybe
amazing.
you should charge extra for the seat that you sit on.
Right. Well, you know, it's part of the part of the Adopt a Seat program. Yes. Yeah, maybe it's a double seat. Yeah. Anyway, no, I won't go there.
I think you could have fun with that.
You certainly could. I mean, it's a fantastic place to pose.
How is the Haskell maintained and restored? It's a very old building, so clearly it needs some maintenance.
Yeah, there's actually a building committee who oversees the maintenance of the building. The Opera House itself, the plasterwork, the very ornate plasterwork, and the ceiling are preserved in part because we don't heat during the winter. So from our season only runs from April 1st until the beginning of November, and the
so
rest
you'll
of
transition into the library
Right.
after that.
And so that does very well for the plasterwork, in that the temperature just hovers just above freezing. It's a pretty interesting place to go in mid-February. My daughter and one of her friends, I took them in for a tour, and they actually sang in there in their winter coats. And
the acoustics would be
the
great.
The acoustics are stunning, even more stunning in the winter.
I can imagine.
So
where was the bat?
So I guess the bat was sleeping. The bat was out on
I know,
on
that's
Thursday,
why I'm asking.
and that was fantastic. Yes, the Haskell has a bat, and apparently the Haskell may or may not have ghosts. And
Maybe the bat is a ghost.
But the bat is quite something.
One of the fun things at the concert the other night was the bat, halfway through the performance, suddenly flew across the stage, sort of waved to everybody, and then flew back again.
I don't know if you noticed, but there had been a very large moth.
Yes.
That was up in the lights, and after
It
the
didn't
bat
stay long, did
right,
it?
and after the bat made its lap,
It became lunch.
the moth was no more, and I thought, that's pretty much the Haskell there.
Yeah, so I sort of figured at that point that the bat must be on staff.
And Jeff said that is the first time that he's ever played and had a bat do a lap.
We wondered whose belfry it was coming from, but you
That's
never
awesome.
know.
That's awesome. It's a fabulous building.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
And then, and then our lighting, it's Dennis Ziegler, who's another volunteer. There's a whole crew of volunteers who just lend their expertise for love of the place.
If people have an interest in doing their own productions there, I mean, clearly you have a season that's being booked and booked, but there's a lot of downtime.
Yeah, absolutely. People should contact me.
Can they book it?
Yeah, they contact me. We take a look at every project quite seriously. We actually have back-to-back community projects coming up on June 1st. So we have Musique Sans Frontières, Music Without Borders, an enormous sing-along with school children from Stansted. And then
Can school children from this side of the tracks join in?
I suspect
That would be wonderful.
it would be. I suspect that it's going to be a full house.
Uh-huh.
But definitely something to consider in the
That's
future.
Something that maybe some of the schools on the Vermont side of the border would really be interested in. Maybe a class at a time, say third grade, one of each.
It's just waiting for those type of projects.
Yeah.
If you go to like I was recently in Baltimore and in Washington D.C. and they have black box theaters for experimental work.
Yes.
We have the Haskell. And why can't we use the downtime? Perhaps it's not really downtime at all.
No,
it's
just waiting.
It is. It's a theater waiting for performers and an audience.
Have you ever been to any of the Fringe Festivals?
Yes, and yes.
The Fringe Festivals are something that are a big deal in Europe, particularly in Scotland, it's growing.
In Montreal.
Edinburgh
is really the home of
Philadelphia and New York, but Edinburgh, yes, is the home. And it's community groups as well as well-known performers who submit proposals or just do pop-up street art. It's fabulous.
We have this gorgeous place. We could certainly, it's limitless what people could do. And that's the beauty of having it's a performing arts gateway.
Yes,
and
truly a gateway.
It truly is. And as I said before, we really need to occupy it. We need to occupy it with our creativity. We need to get our young people turned on to performing.
Yeah.
Lynn was telling me that she did an art show some years back where they just brought in big frames on wheels, and they moved them into the opera house itself, and then had local artists exhibit. And I look at Lisa Eshelman Foster, and so she's exhibiting in other galleries around the country.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking, could we not arrange for something closer to home? And
she runs fun workshops too.
I look at the MAC and I look at the programming of the MAC, and I think that there's ways that we can all work together and co-promote.
Yes.
That the Haskell should be a hub, and it shouldn't be in competition with anyone.
No.
And it should be, if someone else has an event going on, we should be co-promoting it, which reminds me, on Thursday evening, before you go to the David Greeley, Mary Rankin, Ailey Robertson show, that you should go down to the VSOs running Blooms and something or another. It's at Spates on Elm Street. They have great music and a wonderful deal on plants. And cider tasting.
And the cider tasting. And the food is provided by the East Side restaurant.
Right.
Dina Gray, who runs the East Side, is one of the most generous people on the planet when it comes to events.
So
it's amazing.
So take in the VSO event and then wrap it up, get up the road, and be in the Haskell for 7:30, and our show goes at 8. So if you make it for 7:45, we'll hold you a seat.
Some of us are actually planning on doing that.
But that's how this all ought to be. We ought to be taking notice of what we're all doing, and then we ought to be promoting and supporting, and we ought to be trooping around to each other's shows.
Yes.
We're very very much off Broadway, and we should behave like we're very much off Broadway, and I think it's wonderful. I think that maybe the outside world thinks it's hokey, but I don't care. Yeah, I don't care, and that's our quality of life. And so I think it's really nice if we can support one another, especially in the arts.
Right. The amazing thing about quote off Broadway is that some incredible productions get test driven.
Right.
And they go on from there. There are many performers and many plays that started small and just got bigger and bigger and ended up who knows where. And we can do that.
It's funny, Catherine Majar mentioned that was the first time that she'd ever played in a solo piano piece in years. And she experimented with new material, closed her performance out with an a cappella piece. And I think that's what the Haskell does. It gives us all permission to experiment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people who have special interests, for example, women's music, the opportunity to have somebody from Vermont and somebody from Canada meet in the middle without having to go through a great deal of drama.
Right.
Just perform, and the audiences come in either side and go back their separate ways.
I had a request recently from the Vermont Association for the Blind asking if we could set up a tactile tour of the Haskell. And I thought,
That would be
wow,
wonderful.
What
Why
a
not?
cool idea. How brilliant would that be? And why
play.
couldn't we expand that on the north side and make that our own, you know?
Set that up, many of us will come.
Well, I'm hoping that many of us will all take part in setting that up. Yeah, it's absolutely.
I'm sure that can happen too. And we are almost out of time. Do you have any last thoughts that you would really like to leave with people that just convey what this is?
I just wanted to say thanks for the opportunity. Like I said, I really think that it's up to all of us to make the Haskell our own, and then we adapt it as part of adopt it as part of our families, and then we pass it on from generation to generation. And it's always been something special.
Yeah.
We just need to keep doing that. We need to keep it alive.
That's great. Well, thank you, Hal, very much for coming in. And in another year, come back.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks for having me.
Here's where we'll end it for today. And as I said earlier, this is going to be part of a series. It's about promoting the whole of the Northeast Kingdom and over the border too. Why not? Because
well, we consider ourselves part of the North Country.
You are part of the Northeast Kingdom or Queendom or whatever we are. And we will be meeting with other people who are doing wonderful things here, who are making a difference, bringing about change for all of us. Thank you.